So, just the old story, if you had any phones or any sort of people going to text you over the next half hour or so, just turn it off, tell them to wait. There's also a bathroom out here to my right if needed. And I think that's all. So I hope you enjoyed the next hour or so. We're going to start off with a song, and we hope to have intervals of songs for the next hour or so, and an open mic at the end, which I forgot to do. Send out. I'll pass this around, so if anyone has a poem to read, just put your name down, and we'll have an open mic at the end. And it'd be lovely to hear your poems. Or a recitation, or some piece in your head. Certainly do that. And we're celebrating Brigid, so it's quite a strong female vibe here, deliberately picked. So when I do this, I can get out of the way and let the ladies take over the rest of the afternoon. So Sophie Kyle, local singer-songwriter, is going to open with a song, and we're delighted that she could come down and do this for us. So give Sophie a nice warm round of applause, please.
Start off with a kind of nature one for the day that's in it. It's from my first album, and it's called Delirium. He led me into a hazel copse and stripped me of my bark, and with the sinewy white sapwood he wove a cage in which to keep the fluttering of my heart. He wove a cage in which to keep the fluttering of my heart. He laid me out on a mossy bank and sang to me my name, and thirstily from the dew I drank till my veins became a running stream through the woodland, soft and dank. Till my veins became a running stream through the woodland, soft and dank. He wept and led one piercing note, ripped from his throat through Christendom. He wept and led one piercing note, ripped from his throat through Christendom, gripped in the arms of delirium, gripped in the arms of delirium. Try as he might to resuscitate the love light in my eyes, rigor mortis had seized my course, which undid the clasp of its mortal box and flew up to the skies, which undid the clasp of its mortal box and flew up to the skies. He wept and led one piercing note, ripped from his throat through Christendom. He wept and led one piercing note, ripped from his throat through Christendom, gripped in the arms of delirium, gripped in the arms of delirium. He learnt his lesson, the darling thing, it nearly broke his heart. You can't mend a bird with a busted wing, no matter how hard you wanted to sing, it's bound for the graveyard cart. No matter how hard you wanted to sing, it's bound for the graveyard cart. He wept and led one piercing note, ripped from his throat through Christendom. He wept and led one piercing note, ripped from his throat through Christendom, gripped in the arms of delirium, sounds of delirium.
Hello everyone, I'm Marion Brannigan from Dundalk Writers, and I'm going to introduce Linda. Linda Tavakoli from County Down is a professional member of the Irish Writers Centre who has been nominated for Best of the Net and Pushcart prizes. Linda facilitates adult creative writing classes and has tutored for the Seamus Heaney Award for schools. She has won poetry and short story prizes in Listowel, the Westival International Poetry Prize, and been published in the Irish Times New Irish Writing. Linda's debut poetry collection, The Boiling Point for Jam, received wide acclaim for its raw honesty and authenticity, while her second collection, A Unison of Breaths, has been recently published by Arlen House. Linda's series of poems about Gaza are presently being translated into Arabic. So I want you to give Linda a warm Céad Míle Fáilte to our poetry celebration to mark St Brigid's Day. Thank you.
A great audience, fantastic. Usually I'm talking to 6 people in Lisburn Library. No, it's lovely. Thank you for coming out, really. It's great to have a lovely audience and people keen to come and hear some poetry. I'd like to thank the bookshop for facilitating the great event today. It's really special. I have to be honest with you, I didn't really know about St Brigid much. Sort of my culture, maybe growing up in Northern Ireland, it wasn't much talked about, but you know, like every writer, you should be doing research, and you know, I've learned a lot in the past couple of days just by researching it, and the lovely lights and so on as we were coming into town. So obviously it's a big event, and I really appreciate being called for such a special event. Thank you, John Noonan, for inviting me back. I read a few poems in the library last year, and I really appreciate you coming here today. So it'll be about, I've timed it to just over 20 minutes, if you're okay for sitting for that length of time. And I read some poems from the debut collection, as has already been said. It's Arlen House has published both my collections. The first one was The Boiling Point for Jam, which was about 3 years ago now, and then A Unison of Breaths is the second one. And then for the second half of the reading, I will do some of my recent Gaza poems, but I'll explain that to you once we get there. So we're in a bookshop, seems appropriate for the first poem to be called Words, and I've written a lot, particularly in the first collection, about my family and about my parents. And I grew up, obviously from my accent, I grew up in Northern Ireland, but I've spent many years abroad. My husband's from Iran, and we've worked abroad as well in the Middle East, so I've written quite a lot about that as well. But we've both been blessed with lovely families, and so I've written quite a lot about my father, who got dementia in his later years, and like I say, this one seems quite appropriate. It's called Words. At 15 he left school, my father, then a boy, countrified and green, setting out for the lands beyond the island of his birth. What he knew was the call of curlews across a loch, the smell of rain teasing its way over a bog, or the hard knocks it took for being 10th of a litter of 10. Later, when time had softened his edges and that bright mind of his no longer grieved the absence of opportunity, he sought solace in words, their tiny print etched like the footprints of ants on the Chambers 20th Century Dictionary, waiting on our scullery shelf. Its brown paper cover wrapped like a familiar cardigan around pages thin as rice paper. At tea times, my father consumed words the same way he ate the food on his plate. Words like gelid and lynch, symposium and ruderal, memorator and treen, each one explored with tenderness of thought and the feathered touch of a big man's fingertips. It wasn't only the meanings he sought, but the way they were pronounced, how they resonated on the tongue, their spelling, their etymology, their simple and joyous surprises. These were his absent education and means of passing on to us what he felt he must have lost. My father, normally a man of few words, offering them up to us like something unexplored and waiting only for the joy of their release. You don't need to worry about clapping. If you like them, clapping you at the end. Okay. I've chosen this one because we live in a terrible world at the moment, as we all know. And so much of it is down to arrogance and greed and power and money and so on. And anyway, I wrote this poem in when my husband was working in Bahrain and I was over there for a short length of time. And he came home one day and he told me this story about what had happened to him at his office. He was helping to build a hospital out there. And there were tea boys, looking after the sort of the senior staff. And anyway, he told me the story and I converted it into my story. But it's the opposite of arrogance and greed. And it's called Tea Boys. The end of a working day, and outside my office, heat can still scorch lungs as cruelly as an ice intake of Arctic breath. Beyond the window, on a small corner of dust, I watch your tea boy heads folded over something that I cannot see. Then, like the opening of a desert flower, you part to stand in quiet thought, and at your feet a planting of 3 green sprigs. A plastic water bottle passes hand to hand, its trickled contents measured out as carefully as if it were a liquid gold. Here is the simple joy that ends your day, and when all you have is this one act of love, and know that it's enough. The next poem, we mentioned Listowel. I was very lucky. It was very close to when I started writing poetry, actually. And I didn't know much about Listowel either, but I submitted a poem and it won one of the competitions in Listowel. And I normally write from things that I've experienced myself. So this one was about the loss of a baby, but it's supposed to be positive. And it's not just for women. When a woman loses a baby, there are other people involved, like husbands and partners and so on. So just bear that in mind whenever I'm reading it. And it's called 43 grams. Too early to name, you were too unfinished in the womb for anyone to love but me. At 14 weeks, your stubbed appendages denied you somehow proper meaning to the world, yet I imagined then the promise of your touch and flying fingers someday glancing on piano keys or toes that curled like leaves in winter after frost. Behind those swollen sockets, I would never know the colour of your eyes, if they were brown or blue or hazel like my own. But somewhere past a sea of years, I watch you dance beneath a saffron sky, on meadows crusted yellow in a summer sun, or hear your footfall whisper soft on winter snow. Yet now your nearly heartbeat grieves in me, its pulse the baby miracle I never knew. Just 43 grams, a single letter's weight of life unfinished in the womb. Too early then to name, so I completed you inside my head and loved you just the same. I'll lighten it a wee bit. It might not seem to lighten things when I tell you that the title of this poem is Murder in the First, but it is a bit of light relief. I am one of 3 siblings, an older brother, an older sister, and then me. And my poor sister had a terrible time because in the naughty things that I did in my youth and my childhood, they were always generally an experiment with her. Like teaching her to smoke and bad things like that. Anyway, those of a certain age in here will remember about immersion heaters and how hot they got. I mean, basically, the scalding hot, like from a kettle. And we sort of grew up in a tiny bungalow in Portadown, and we always, when we were little, we always had baths together. So there was me and my sister, and our mum was nearly always out in the garden, trusting us to behave ourselves and not drown each other. But you could always hear her kind of humming in amongst the flowers and everything. The window was always open. And this is a true story. The first time I tried to kill my sister, we were in a bath. The vague drift of our mother's hum scenting through an open window from the garden. The water's tepidness sloshed a small tsunami between our spooned bodies. The combined grime of us tide marking a plimsoll line around the white enamel. A spiky spine of bones protruded like the carcass of some ancient stegosaurus down her back, each vertebra flinching as I beakered water on her skinny shoulders from the tap. Not hot enough, she said, her seniority then a valid reason for a younger sister to comply. In bed that night, I prayed to Jesus or whoever else would listen that she live, and my punishment would take into account the archipelago of beauty I had fondly scorched like a tattoo upon her naked skin, and that I kindly left for her to keep. She still has the scars on her back, but she's forgiven me a long time ago. So those were 4 poems from the first book. I kind of like reading those because, you know, especially when I get to the Gaza poems, you'll have to forgive me. I have to hold myself together, but nice to have a bit of fun. Okay, this is from a Union of Breasts, and I've chosen just one poem. This is my my most recent collection, and I've chosen it because it's about my mother, whom I just mentioned. And like I said before, we were blessed with very good poem parents, and this one's called Cold Tea. And again, you know, I remember my mum grew up in 5 Mile Town and my dad was from Fermanagh. and I grew up in Portadown, that's where I went to school. But even in Portadown, when we moved there, you know, there were people who read tea leaves. I'm sure you maybe still know people who read tea leaves. I tried to read them once, but I bought a couple of books about them, but I wasn't very good. But my mother was absolutely really good at tea leaf reading. And people used to come to our house to listen to what she told them, right? So this is Cold Tea. It's not really very funny, but anyway, that's the story. In the good room of our small bungalow, Mom read tea leaves from china cups rescued from the Oxfam shop. Her slight frame and unassuming manner a mere subterfuge for her divining skills. There were rules, never on a Sunday and never in the company of my aunt. I don't expect our dad much approved either, but he let it go, understanding that some things are probably best left undisturbed. Believers came to swallow readings with the trust of any never on the Sabbath congregation, and sculpted dregs of faith round porcelain curves. Prophecies of doom were subtly laid aside for Sunday sermons. I sometimes wonder if she'd seen her future buried in the leaves. An arrow, never good news. Snakes, the same. Or wavy lines pretending journeys unfulfilled. But if she did, it was for none of us to know, for that was not our mother's way. Looking back, I should have read the signs myself. Cups of tea, half drunk and cold, perched on the bird table, or teetering on bathroom shelves, and once or twice abandoned by our father's garden tools, that sedge of herons she had planted by the pond. It's the way I like to drink it, she would say, the dare in her eyes, always enough. And later, tea leaves carefully strained, I would present to her a sun, a fish, a flying bird, and catch her smile, cupped in her hands, the white lie of a daughter's love. Want to get a drink? These new cap things are not easy. Okay, so that's the poems that I'm going to read from the two collections. And so I better just tell you how I started to write about Gaza. We all know when it started, on the 7th of October, just over 2 years ago. And I write about the simple stories, really, about Gaza, the ones that you don't see on mainstream television. We watch a lot of Al Jazeera, and don't let that frighten you or anything. There's fantastic documentaries and things on Al Jazeera, but it does give you quite a different view of things. We watch other things, obviously, as well, to try and have a balanced view of what's happening in the world. But it's the small stories that go unnoticed that really get to me, and those are the ones that I write my poetry about. So the first poem I'm going to read is the very first poem that I wrote. And it happened after October the 7th, about 3 weeks after the initial start of the present problems. I was driving in the car, and there was a radio interview going on with a British paediatrician. And she had been to Gaza for a couple of weeks stint, and she was telling what she had found in the paediatric hospital. So it was very, very early on in the trouble. And as she was talking about it, and even then it was horrible, but at least the hospitals were still standing. But she was saying, as she was going through the different wards, and it was only children, and she had found this baby. And so this is where this poem came from, and it's called Unknown 99. There's a baby in the hospital labelled Unknown 99. Like some odd, uninteresting gift relegated to the nameless list. But I will call you Little Miracle, and dare to think about who it is you might become when time transports you to a place of cradling light, where displaced names have lost their anonymity, where the moon can chase the stars in limpid skies, and where silence sheds its longing into sleep like melted snow. I see you there, war's little miracle, your belly full again, your heart the beating presence of a nation's grief. So I wrote one poem a month after that, because all of you poets in here will know sometimes it's just really hard to write poems, and I only wrote them if there was something that really moved me. But it actually has turned out, I've written 26 poems now, and they're, like was mentioned before, they're being translated into Arabic at the moment, which is a real honour for me, actually. So we'll skip then from the very first poem to well, I grew up and I had my teenage years in the Troubles at home. It wasn't that pleasant, but you know, when I talk to my school friends now about what life was like for us in the 70s and so on, when things were really, really bad up there, we just sort of look back and think, well, we had ordinary lives, you know, if there were bombs going off, we sort of got used to it. It's horrible to think of it. But anyways, I was looking at something about Gaza the other day, and it reminded me of something as well that had happened at home. So this is called A Bomb Basks in a Living Room. I remember once a bomb blew up the innards of our town, a mile or so from where we lived. I'd been sitting in our living room and watching telly with the family, the evening news as usual, blasting out the hottest stories of the day on Belfast streets, when suddenly 600 pounds of hatred made its own arrival to our relatively peaceful lives. Next morning, Daddy took us down to see the aftermath and to wisely keep his counsel to himself, for gentleness was his tool of war and nothing else. In Mr. Muin al-Hatto's Gaza City home, an unexploded ornament of war lies beached inside his living room. With the sleekness of a shark, it stretches its 2,000 pounds of ill intent across the rubbled floor. A slumbering time bomb with a name, Mark 84 Mod 4, 2,000 pounds, writ large upon its mottled skin. I wonder what a father thinks when every substitute for shelter offers up its same bleak consequence. Better then, perhaps, to live or die amongst the dreads of home and recognise their truth in all its particles of enforced misery. The next poem has just got 7 lines. Sorry, I'm sticking. If you remember a couple of months ago, there was a lot, even on mainstream news, there was a lot about the humanitarian offerings of, and where people in Gaza went to get food for their families, and then they were, you know, gathering, and then they were shot. So this is a little poem that came out of that. It's called Bait. He left for food a bag of flour, and because he could not run like others ran, he returned to them now, a bag full now of something else. I've only got three left. For people who don't write poetry or study poetry, it comes in different forms, and I'm very fond of the form. It's called haibun, and it's a mixture of prose and haiku, or short poem, and you can mix it up whatever way you like. You can have the haiku, the little 3-line haiku first, and then a little bit of prose, and then follow it up by a haiku, which is the way that I've created this one. Or you can have the prose first and then follow it with the haiku. But this is the second haibun that I've written, and I really want to write more of them, because it's different when you're writing a poem and you're writing prose. There's a different sort of mechanism to it, and this sort of combines. So this starts with a little 3-line poem, ends with a 3-line poem. This is not your child. This is the child of someone else's suffering. The beginning of winter, and a child burrows her small body into the chilling cage of her brother's brittle ribs. She hears the faint crackle of marrow within his bones soughing from under his vest, beneath the sodden wetness of a jacket their father left behind. Rain still drenches through the plastic walls and roof of their tent, saturating a mattress that absorbs any comfort in their sibling embrace. This is their world, and tomorrow that other world has already forgotten. Once upon a time, when children sloshed in puddles, there was only joy. This is the penultimate one, and I wrote this one last week, and it was a really sad poem again, but so forgive me, but I get, it's really hard whenever you're reading them. So there was a very small interview on the programme last week, and it was of this gentleman who had gone back to his home, and he had lost 6 members of the family, including a baby. They'd all died. And he had managed to survive, and he had gone back, and he was using a big flour sieve to sieve the dirt and so on to get the bones of whoever was left in the rubble. But the saddest thing of all was that it was 2 years since he could get home to do that. Anyway, this is called Little Bones. This is what he owns of you now, your little bones. These treasures sieved like flour amongst the dust of what remains. Between his fingertips, the fragment of a foot, a tooth, a curvature of clavicle, their blessings singing to him still, a song of love, and only little, little bones. So I don't need to tell you who this one's about, but you can make your own mind up. So I'm finishing with this one here. And it's called So Much Wasted Good. In his sickness, someone tells him there will be a tomorrow for those others. That beyond their raw-boned wasting, there are skeletons they must still call hope. Yet one more year ebbs as a world moulders in its own self-interest, knowing that the saddest truth is just how much good he could have done and didn't. Thank you.
Thank you. What powerful, powerful poems they were, And thank you, Linda, for that. It was extraordinary poems. And I think the line that will live on with me is, I completed you in my head. Yeah. Extraordinary. But it was like key change if Sophie is still in the room. Sophie Coyle. We'll have a song from Sophie. So give Sophie a nice warm welcome back.
Such beautiful poetry, and not wanting to shatter that spell